from Cilacap onwards to Jakarta. Well, joining me now for more on this, the Assistant Treasurer Josh Frydenberg and the Shadow Parliamentary Secretary Ed Husic. Josh Frydenberg, first to you, a strong response by the government in relation to this. What are the reasons for moving into these uncharted waters with Indonesia?
Well, firstly, David, this is a horrible outcome. It's a very sad day for the families of Andrew and Myuran, and also for all the people who did so much to seek clemency from the Indonesian government. There needed to be a formal response from Australia, and I know that there is bipartisan support for it. And I must say, those scenes yesterday where their families were paying their last visit to their loved ones and they were just bombarded by cameras and people, it was just a terrible scene. And I think for so many people, they understood the Prime Minister's words this morning. This was cruel and this was unnecessary, and so there needed to be a response.
Ed Husic, is it an appropriate response?
I think so. I think regardless of your politics in this nation or your views, the nation is united across a range of emotions, from deep sadness for what's occurred, but also anger as well. I think Foreign Minister Bishop this morning expressed it very well when she said both men were examples of the hope of transformation. They had made a grievous error 10 years ago, but had spent their time rehabilitating themselves and helping others. And as a result, what have we got? We've got two people who've tragically lost their lives. We have relations between what should be two strong neighbours have been fundamentally strained. Indonesia's position on the world stage undermined when it seeks clemency for its citizens in other parts of the world. Its legitimacy in being able to advocate that argument weakened. Very little has been gained out of this terrible situation, and I think we stand as one with the government on this.
Josh Frydenberg, any sense of how long the ambassador will be withdrawn? He won't be withdrawn immediately, not until the final arrangements are made with the families, but how is an appropriate time? Because the Prime Minister said he's confident that relations will return back to normal eventually.
Well, look, those decisions will be made in due course by the Foreign Minister in consultation with the Prime Minister. But we have to understand the importance of the bilateral relationship with Indonesia. They're a country of 240 million people. We've worked very cooperatively and successfully with them, particularly on security issues. And we are a friend of Indonesia, and they are a friend of us. But this whole episode, and I think Ed put it very, very well, has been damaging and stressful to the relationship, and has not been good for Indonesia's identity and the views of it from around the world. I mean, Indonesia has sought clemency from more than 200 of its own citizens around the world who are on death row, and they couldn't find it in their heart to give clemency to these two men who were clearly rehabilitated. The other point here, David, is our consular officials have done so much behind the scenes to try to get a better outcome here. Magellan, our Consul General in Bali, her and her team have done an enormous amount of work, and it has been a bipartisan effort. A number of former Prime Ministers, from Paul Keating to Julia Gillard to John Howard, as well as Tony Abbott and Bill Shorten, have done everything they can to get a better outcome here, and it's just a very, very sad day.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It has been bipartisan. We did see some criticism, or at least insinuation, from some celebrities yesterday that the government, and in particular Tony Abbott, had not done enough. Ed Husic, that's not the view of the Labor Party, though, is it?
No, not at all. I mean, I think too much stock was placed in that. I think they were rightly, the views counter to what was expressed in that video were expressed very strongly, and we just deal with it and move on. I think I just wanted to express with Josh as well, I think the deep gratitude that a lot of Australians would have felt in relation to the efforts made by our diplomatic corps and those officials on the ground in Indonesia. Josh is absolutely right to single them out, to say that we recognise the lengths they went to. I think the other thing too is I feel a deep sense of, I have to say I was stunned when I heard that our Foreign Minister had not even been formally notified of this act. I think a lot of people in Australia would be deeply angered by that failure to acknowledge and to advise the government in that formal way. For a Foreign Minister who has gone to great lengths to articulately, sensitively but very strongly express the views of the nation in relation to this situation and to seek clemency, and to not be given that respect, I think is deeply troubling. And to be honest, from my own perspective, I'm deeply angered by that. I think we deserve better. And also the announcement when it was made this week, as the nation was commemorating the centenary of Anzac, again, I think was very poor. And the fact that the pastor, that the religious support that both Andrew and Myuran requested in their final moments, that was declined as well, again, I think is just patently wrong. And I think this is why in the short term the relationship is deeply strained, and it will take some time to recover, frankly.
Josh, it did seem all the way through that, Indonesia seemed to be giving Australia the finger with, as Josh pointed out, the announcement on Anzac Day, the fact that the government now hasn't had official confirmation, also the heavy-handed way in which the prisoners were transported. Yesterday we saw the families have to run the gauntlet with journalists instead of being driven up to the ferry as they were before. Is this seen by the Australian government as something deliberate or just carelessness by Indonesia?
I just think it reflects poorly on the process overall, because it has been so demeaning, it's been so extended. And as the Prime Minister pointed out, these men have been in jail for 10 years, and now we have this outcome. The other point here is it's not just Australians who've been executed, it's also a Brazilian, it's also people from Africa. So the Indonesians, I don't think, have singled out Australia or Australians here for special treatment. We have to understand that we respect their sovereignty and their legal system and their due processes, but there were questions about whether all those processes had actually been exhausted by the time these men had been killed overnight.
Exactly.
And that's a real question too. So I'm of the view that the relationship with Indonesia is just too important to Australia, to put that under question. But do need a cooling off period, and the Indonesians have to know that we are very, very disappointed about how this has been handled, and many Australians are deeply distressed about the outcome overnight. And that message needs to be made very clear to our closest and largest neighbour.
Josh Frydenberg, Ed Husic, great to have your company this morning and great to see such strong bipartisanship on what is a very difficult day for this nation. Thanks for joining us. After this break, we'll speak to Peter Morrissey, the Bali 9 duo